democracy, the importance of women in governance. We have an incredible lineup of speakers this afternoon, and so we'll go ahead and get started. To open us up, I'd like to welcome the Deputy Foreign Minister, Fatmira Isaki, to provide opening remarks. We'll turn it over to you.
Madam Rosemary DiCarlo, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. At the outset, I would like to welcome all of you here in the ancient Ohrid and to express my sincere gratitude to all of the participants in today's panel and to our moderator, Ms. Valerie Dowling, who will be steering this panel so we can have a good exchange of views and ideas, as well as a fruitful discussion on the correlation between democracy and gender equality. I have to admit that it is incredibly inspiring to be among so many high-ranking politicians and diplomats from European and non-European countries to discuss a topic which could not be more timely. And I say this because when we think of our societies, we should not only think of them to be more digital or more sustainable, but also more inclusive. As women, and especially as political leaders, we must ensure equal opportunities in the labor market and achieve gender balance in decision-making and in politics. Why? Because there is no doubt that our democracies are stronger when women are involved as equals. And how do we do this? The answer is simple: by leading through action and by leading through example. And not because women are better, but because women are different. The voice of a woman, her intuition, her way of thinking, responsibility, gentleness, politeness, and many times even her sense of humor can soften even the hardest heart. Women are known and recognized to be exceptional life motivators, givers of hope for change in social, political, and economic life. In one word, women play a key role in shaping our lives and society. Therefore, women must also have their well-deserved place in governance. Although some traditional societies see them in the role of mothers, wives, teachers throughout history, the central role of women in society has ensured the stability, progress, and long-term development of nations. The more women take on so-called non-traditional roles, the more they will cause substantial impact. They will bring more creativity, value, practicality, and energy. And it goes without saying that the active participation of women in governance is not only necessity, but also their inalienable right as well. Dear friends, it's my firm conviction that as women, we have to make sure that we get the respect we are due and the treatment appropriate for our position, just like any other male colleague. Unfortunately, strengthening the role of women in societies and their meaningful participation in every aspect of our life still remains a challenge even for countries that have been promoting democratic policies for centuries. There are women who are being hurt every day in every corner of the world, but do not have the power nor the office to speak out. And this is precisely what our mission should be: to foster a more equal society and to continue our fight for those who cannot make themselves heard. Therefore, it is essential for us to advocate progressive policies and to undertake actions with a gender perspective. In that context, I would like to welcome US President Biden's initiative advancing women and girls' civic and political leadership, an initiative established with the aim to prevent gender-based discrimination and violence, and a response to the increasing issue of online harassment, especially towards women of color and with disabilities. This initiative is an excellent incentive for promoting gender equality by providing a democratic environment and healthy space for women's professional development and active involvement in government, especially in our region. The Western Balkan countries are continuously working on promotion of gender equality as a basis for the development of our democratic societies. And the region has made progress essentially in the area of respecting fundamental human rights and ensuring the same opportunities for both genders. However, prevention from violence and protection of women victims of violence, especially during the pandemic, remains a weak link in the system and requires even stauncher commitment and action from both women and men who are the advocates for women's rights. Ladies and gentlemen, in line with national and international commitments as well as the existing trends in Western democracies, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of North Macedonia is undertaking the task of promoting participation of women in foreign policy and in decision-making processes. As a NATO member country and an integral part of global multilateral family, the UN, the Council of Europe, etc., a country whose strategic objective is the EU membership, and a country which will hold the OSCE chairmanship in office in 2023, North Macedonia is firmly dedicated to devising and advancing sensitive policies. The National Strategy for Gender Equality is the basic strategic document of the Republic of North Macedonia in that regard. The strategy represents a comprehensive framework for further activities in promoting gender equality and empowerment of women. The strategy is carried out for a period of 6 years, from 2021 to 2026. By adopting this strategy, the Republic of North Macedonia aspires to promote the state of gender equality in accordance with international standards, recommendations, and commitments, and the integration of the gender perspective in national policies, thus making the participation of women in governance a top priority on the government's agenda. As Deputy Foreign Minister, I would like to stress that feminine foreign policy is needed now more than ever. The pandemic, the climate crisis, and the shrinking democratic space are putting us at risk of a global gender equality recession. The COVID-19 pandemic has hindered the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, including SDG 5, where some of the global progress achieved in recent years has unfortunately been undone. Dear friends, all women must have the opportunity to reach their full potential and participate equally in all areas of society by providing their perspective and expertise in public life and in public discourse. Women also rightfully seek to increase their meaningful participation in the decision-making processes by ensuring that they are empowered to lead and contribute, that they are equipped with the necessary skills to succeed, and that they are fully supported to participate by having unimpeded access to all opportunities and resources. In conclusion, I would like to end on a positive note and reiterate the obvious fact that slowly but persistently and effectively, women are strengthening their position in many areas, including in the area of foreign policy, where they are making a valuable and irreplaceable contribution. So my main message for today is, we have done a lot in improving the gender balance in our society. Let us do our best to even further improve it in the areas of decision-making, governance, and politics in general. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Foreign Minister, for those inspiring remarks to help us frame our conversation today. It's my pleasure to now welcome our next speaker, President Vjosa Osmani Sadru. You are welcome to deliver remarks from the podium or your seat.
Dear friends, dear Madam Deputy Prime Minister, Madam Undersecretary, distinguished guests, Madam Vice Minister, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to sit with some outstanding and inspiring women leaders and with all of you today in order to discuss the importance of women in governance, as well as in all areas of life. We all know too well that having women in leading roles means having better performing institutions, more hands-on policies, and increasingly more responsible and accountable governing practices. It is also a sign of a society's wisdom, its maturity, but most importantly, a sign of its vision. Because only with half of the society being rightfully represented at the decision-making table can the whole society thrive and succeed. In my inauguration speech as President of the Republic, I said that a girl belongs whatever she wants to be. She belongs whatever the dreams she dreams of and works hard for. And to me, this is not just a line. I am led and guided by this determination on a daily basis. And it's not just so because it sounds right. It is so because I truly believe that this is just and that it is right. All of us seated at this event want the very best for women and girls around the world, because we believe that a society that grants equal rights to girls and women, a society that treats women with dignity, a society that values their work and contribution equally as much as that of men, is the kind of society that will lead our world to new heights. We need to work hard for a world where history books write equally of men and women alike. A world where business meetings are chaired or co-chaired by women. A world where we fight the manels and embrace gender-balanced panels. A world in which news coverage spread the stories with women on focus. In essence, we still need to work hard for greater equality and more balanced and just representation of women at all levels. The patriarchy is a predominant root cause of the problem in our region. We navigate in a system of values where leadership, authority, as well as power are associated with men and masculinity. In most parts of the world, gender roles accepted by societies ascribe to the leadership of men, while women are portrayed and seen in rather supportive and caretaking roles. This kind of perception and portraying of gender roles has represented a direct challenge and impediment to so many women who wanted to be in politics and/or active and engaged in decision-making processes. Women's equal participation in governance, be that political, managerial, entrepreneurial, must be our everyday goal. I keep saying this over and over. It is not just the right thing to do. It is the smartest thing to do. Because women's perspectives, thoughts, as well as experiences enrich governance, and they make it more responsive to our everyday needs. Women's participation in politics help advance gender equality. It contributes to solution-driven policymaking and helps enhance the quality of life by meeting priorities of families, women and men, and the society at large. I am happy to share a positive picture of my country as we speak. From a war-torn country and a predominantly patriarchal society, Kosovo today stands out for the highest representation of women compared to previous years. 35% of MPs in Kosovo's parliament have been elected women, 33% in the percentage of women ministers in the government. In less than 15 years of our independence, Kosovo has elected 2 women presidents, and the citizens of Kosovo made a woman the most voted person in the history of the country recorded. Today I stand in front of you representing my people while serving as their president, which in most honesty is the honor of my life. However, the journey has not always been an easy one. There have been plenty of people, obviously men, that told me that politics wasn't a woman's job. I was told that I would never make it, and that was mainly driven by the fact that I was a woman. But there are 3 things that keep you going: determination, courage, as well as commitment. One must be persistent. One must dare to challenge and stand up for herself as well as for every other woman and girl. And one must be passionate about what they do. It is not always easy to not lose focus, but it becomes way easier when the goal is clear. And when the goal is to empower women and girls, there is nothing, there's no challenge that can stand on your way. As you all know, Kofi Annan once said, study after study has taught us that there is no tool for development more effective than the empowerment of women. No other policy is as powerful in increasing the chances of education for the next generation than the empowerment of women. And I'd like to just add to that, that no other policy is as powerful in increasing our chances for a better, more just, and more prosperous societies than the empowerment of women. As a country that shares a painful past and has risen from the ashes of the war to turn into one of the most democratic countries in the region, I want to not only share our successful story with the world, but also to appeal to everyone in this room and beyond to actively engage for greater and a more equal representation of women. We need action, and we need it now, because there is a persistent gap standing between words and deeds. This is a common global challenge, and as much as it must turn into our priority commitment and our hourly commitment, it continues to be a huge problem. Understanding the paramount importance of equality in representation and governance, we have placed women empowerment as one of the top 3 priorities as part of our commitments, the commitments of the Republic of Kosovo for the Summit for Democracy organized by President Biden. In line with our commitment to bolster the role of women in our society, we are working to also amend relevant legislation to align them all with the law on gender equality to ensure equal representation of women at policymaking and governance levels. And in this very same spirit, we are going to organize the first edition of the Forum on Women, Peace and Security, which will be held in Pristina this October. While this forum will be a great opportunity for us all to measure the progress we collectively marked in terms of implementing the WPS agenda, it is also a forum to best showcase the stories of women champions and everyday advocates of women empowerment across all areas of life, from Kosovo as well as around the world. It must be clear to everyone that women's rights are non-negotiable. Respect for them is at the heart of our collective progress. Therefore, we truly cherish and applaud the contribution of the Summit for Democracy in this regard. Despite the progress achieved over the years, women still face numerous challenges, and the space for their engagement is often limited. I share the view that women's empowerment lies in the full realization of all our fundamental rights. It requires transforming power relations and addressing structural inequalities. It also means enabling women to take ownership of over their lives, their bodies, and destinies. These rights have been enshrined in properly enforced laws. These rights must be breathed and lived. I want to end by saying that we need more women in leadership positions and decision-making bodies. We need more women in all sectors, in politics, economy, and all areas of life, work and public engagement. So I ask all of us to work towards meeting this goal with conviction, because more women in leadership positions means more action towards addressing everyday challenges, more voices standing up for human rights, more resources to foster our economic growth, and more creativity to solve our everyday problems. It means also more space for other women as well. It creates the necessary space for the unheard voices to be heard. Obviously, I can't end without quoting a trailblazer, a global champion for women's rights, the woman who was our voice when we had no voice, the late US Secretary Madeleine Albright, whose legacy will be recognized in the first Forum for Women, Peace and Security that will be organized in Kosovo this fall. Secretary Albright said, "It took me quite a long time to develop a voice. And now that I have one, I am not going to be silent." Dear all, I invite you to use your voice, to never hold back, to stand up for what you believe in and bring along in this journey other women, many other women, as well as men, champions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Osmani Sadru. We really appreciate your story, and you're a powerful example of exactly why it's important to have women represented in office. I'd like to welcome our next guest speaker, Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to join this discussion on the important topic of women in governance. At this critical point in world affairs, one question seems obvious. What is needed to sustain peace and promote democratic development? I believe the answer to this question requires an approach that is more inclusive, more just, and more sustainable. That is an approach with women's leadership and gender equality at its core. Advancing gender equality and women's meaningful participation in public life is both the right thing to do and the smart thing to do. We agree. Researchers have found that gender equality is the #1 predictor of peace, more so than a state's wealth, level of democracy, or religious identity. Increasing the number of women in institutions contributes to breaking down stereotypes about women's capacities and place in society at large. It also helps build public trust in institutions and political systems, which are then more representative of the full population, not just half. However, as of January of this year, women make up just 26% of national legislators worldwide. Only 5 countries have a parliament that is at least 50% women. I commend the government of North Macedonia on its efforts to advance women's empowerment in the region and for leading by example and appointing for the 2nd time in a row a woman as Minister of Defense. In parallel, I welcome the efforts of other women ministers and deputy ministers holding cabinet positions in North Macedonia. Now, how do we advance women's participation and leadership throughout the world? Well, first, there's an urgent need to address the structural barriers that perpetuate gender gaps through discriminatory and gendered norms, practices, and policies. There's also a need to address violence against women, including female political candidates. Advancing positive, proactive measures to increase women's participation in peace and political processes is necessary to achieve women's de facto equality and sustainable peace. Now, in the Western Balkans, several countries have successfully introduced temporary special measures to enhance women's participation in political and public life. In Albania, where there's a requirement of at least 30% of the less represented gender in candidate lists, Women hold 36% of parliamentary seats. In North Macedonia, where there's a 40% quota, women hold 42% of parliamentary seats. And in Montenegro, where there is a 30% quota, women hold 27% of parliamentary seats. And we heard the amazing figures in Kosovo as well today. Also, more must be done to engage and create space for women peace builders as leaders in advancing inclusive peace. The Kosovo Trust Building Platform, supported by the United Nations and managed by 3 women-led organizations, is a first-of-its-kind hub of information on the initiatives, achievements, opportunities, and champions for building trust in Kosovo. In partnership with authorities across the Western Balkans, a new initiative supported by the United Nations Peace Building Fund is focused on strengthening the role of youth in promoting increased mutual understanding, constructive narratives, respect for diversity and trust, gender equality, and women's empowerment at the core of these efforts. Excellencies, there is no doubt that war exacts a devastating toll on women and girls. Countries in the Western Balkans know this issue all too well. In conflict, women face increased burdens of care when social infrastructure is destroyed. They face sexual violence as a tactic of war. To ensure lasting peace, women must be at the table during peace processes, and peace agreements must take into account gender considerations. Finally, resources must match the vision of gender equality in governance and peace efforts. Recognizing that young women, who are so often at the head of peace movements, face additional barriers to their political participation, the United Nations has scaled up its support for the Gender and Youth Promotion Initiative from $2.7 million in 2016 to $51.5 million in 2021. But as we look ahead at the global economy impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and now the war in Ukraine, the challenges ahead are anything but easy. Realizing sustainable peace requires fast-tracking women's leadership and participation, even against the odds. To achieve these goals, we'll need to work together, conscious that it is our common future that's at stake. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Undersecretary General DiCarlo. We really appreciate the work that you're spearheading in your role at the United Nations. It's my pleasure to next welcome Slavica Grukovska, the Deputy Prime Minister, to deliver remarks.
Hello, it is my pleasure to be here today, and first I would like to start with congratulations to 2 brave men that took the courage to join our most gender disbalanced panel, speaking about the importance of the women in the governance. And maybe actually it is a result of the current situation that we are facing on, and that's why we have this panel speaking on together. And it reminds me big in 1999 or 1991 when I first stepped up in politics, only for ideological issues, and when we have started to found the youth strength of my political party. We have put first three things in our statute and in our program declaration. The first one was to abandon the responsibility for young people to go in regular military services. The second one was to establish gender quota, not only in the youth strength bodies, but also in the political party and in society. And the third one was to decriminalize the homosexuality. And to try to transfer you in that period of time, it was a historically very challenging time for ex-Yugoslavian countries, war around us. We have just become an independent country. And I said, what are you doing? I mean, I was president, the first president of Social and Democratic Youth of Macedonia back then, and they said, but for the first part, you're trying to break the constitution. Asking the young people not to go to military, it's against the constitution, you will be prosecuted. But nevertheless, we kept it in our program declaration, yet it came in power while we have been in power in the period 2000 to 2006. On the second one, on gender quota, I will leave it for the last one. On the decriminalization of the homosexuality, they said, but you're crazy. If you speak about this item, you will never get married. Please be quiet on this. Don't speak about those kind of things. But nevertheless, we continue to be loud and speak about all issues that we believed that it's important for the society, for marginalized groups and everything that is important and what society makes more democratic than it is. And then regarding the gender quota, they all said that we should be ashamed of, that the quota system is embarrassing for the women, that we as women should not allow to actually offend other women with establishing gender quota as a positive discrimination tool. But I'm proud to say that we have been the first one then, and we have succeeded to make it a persistent issue, which resulted in 2002 to gain around the idea other women from other political parties, that resulted with the signing of the first declaration for more women in politics that has been signed by all political party leaders. And that was actually the first declaration that started to roll afterwards resulted with a quota in the laws regarding the presentation on the women of the list. So, if I may refer to one statement of Miss Margaret Thatcher, that if you want something said, ask a man, but if you want something done, ask a woman. Actually, we did it, everything that we have done so far. But all my life, actually, I hated very much to speak about these issues only among women. Because I strongly believe that is not a women issue. That is a general society issue that we should all speak about. And if a political leadership is really sincere that we want a democratic society, then should be the male leaders, political leaders, being here and speaking about this issue, and even having more 100% male panelists on this panel talking about the importance of women in the governance. But I was referring to these three examples just to say that breaking stereotypes is very difficult. And it is a process, not only regarding the women, but regarding regarding young people, regarding the people with disabilities. But it is a reason to speak about it more and more and louder. And I will tell you the example of the stereotype in one of the processes of making the list and so on. We had a male who was pretty much against to have women on the list for the parliament elections. And his explanation was, you know, I've been working as a gynecologist in my town for all my life. I don't know woman that can be member of the parliament from my town. And that is one of the biggest stereotypes that I have heard, and the biggest possible humiliation for someone using as, I would say, excuse not to have or not to promote women in power. Luckily, taking all the actions in between and making us more persistent and even more strong to fight for this issue, we are now to the stage, now even since in 21st century, to still discuss about the importance of women in politics. And it took us centuries not to be 100% successful and do not have this still on the topic on our political agenda. I have to refer on a statement of Eleanor Roosevelt. She said, "Woman is like a tea bag. When you put it in a hot water, you will see and you will realize how strong she is." So we are that strong, and we are not going to give up. And I believe the next time, if we succeed, this panel to be on the first 3 important panels on the summits or conferences and so on, or even not to have it at all, will be the complete success of our achievements. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Deputy Prime Minister. We're going to welcome our next panelist virtually from the United States Department of State's Office of Global Women's Issues, Katrina Fotovat.
Thank you so much, Valerie, and congratulations and many thanks to the North Macedonian government for hosting the Prespa Forum. This is such an important forum for discussion and collaboration. It's truly an honor to be in the presence of so many distinguished leaders, gender champions, and friends. I want to especially thank President Osmani, Vice Minister Groskovska, Deputy Foreign Minister Isaki, Undersecretary General DeCarlo. Thank you all for your incredibly inspiring words. I only regret that I have to follow all of you in all of your inspiration. I should note that I had the pleasure to meeting with Charge d'Affaires Petskovska last night here in Washington, D.C., and we became immediate friends. And it was so heartwarming to see so many intersecting priorities between North Macedonia and the United States on democracy and women's leadership. I only truly wish I could be with you all at such an incredible panel in person. As mentioned, my name is Katrina Fotovat. Please, since we are all now friends, call me Kat. I am the senior official for the Secretary's Office of Global Women's Issues at the U.S. Department of State. Promoting gender equity and equality is a long-standing cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy. This is a matter of human rights, justice, and fairness, and a strategic imperative that reduces poverty and promotes economic growth, advances political stability, and fosters democracy. Rooted in this long-standing belief, my office is tasked with an important mandate: ensuring that the rights and empowerment of women and girls in all their diversity is integrated throughout U.S. foreign policy. One of the central tenets of U.S. gender policy is advancing women, peace, and security. The full and meaningful participation of women and girls, including their safety as they participate in civic and political life, is essential to the health of democracy. We know that when women are empowered participants, the world is safer, more prosperous, and more secure. Today, the world is facing several significant challenges that disproportionately impact women and girls. These include what I call the 4 Cs: climate crisis, COVID-19, humanitarian conflict and crisis in Ukraine, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, just to name a few. The United States recognizes that in order to adequately address these pressing challenges, as Secretary Blinken often notes, no one nation can do it alone. We must work together as partners, and to be most effective, we must center the needs of women and girls in the development and implementation of policy. Inclusion of women, as the late Secretary Madeleine Albright often said, is not only the right thing to do, it is the smart thing to do. Grounded in the 2017 Women, Peace, and Security Act and the subsequent strategy, the State Department focuses our women, peace, and security work on 4 lines of effort: supporting women's meaningful participation in conflict and crisis-related decision-making, improving women and girls' access to aid and protection from gender-based violence, abuse, and exploitation, modeling best practices through U.S. foreign policy efforts, and finally, working with partner governments to make sure measurable progress, improving women's lives and meaningful participation. The priority areas of our Women, Peace, and Security strategy were also core priorities for the Summit for Democracy. Because as Vice President Harris has said, the status of women is the status of democracy. During the US and Sweden co-hosted event at the summit, Empowering Prosperity, Advancing the Status of Women to Advance the State of Democracy, the US government launched two major gender and democracy initiatives. First, at the summit, the US Trade Representative Katherine Tai announced a new Advancing Women and Girls Civic and Political Leadership Initiative, which will provide up to $33.5 million to support the greater democratic representation of women and girls. This initiative will encompass efforts to promote women's inclusion in democratic decision-making and peace processes, while working to prevent and address gender inequality and gender-based violence. There are several other initiatives under this particular initiative, including one overseen by my office, supporting her empowerment, Women's Inclusion for New Security, or what we call She Wins, which provides tailored support for the initiatives of local, women-led civil society organizations in Africa, the Middle East, and North Africa, South and Central Asia, to defend against authoritarianism, fight corruption, and promote respect for human rights and peace in their communities. Second, the US and Denmark announced a new initiative at the summit, the Global Partnership for Action on Gender-Based Online Harassment and Abuse. Since then, the partnership was officially launched in March of this year and has grown a cohort of regionally diverse members, including Sweden, the Republic of Korea, Chile, and several other countries who are committed to preventing and addressing the growing scourge of online technology-facilitated gender-based violence. Our commitment to these principles, including inside the United States, were evidenced just yesterday by the launch by Vice President Kamala Harris, who inaugurated a special task force to curb online harassment and abuse. Underscored by both the commitments made at the Summit for Democracy and our efforts to advance women, peace, and security, the United States recognizes a simple fact: inclusive democracies that are representative of all its people, including women and girls in all their diversity, are stronger and more effective. In closing, I would again like to thank and congratulate the government of North Macedonia, not only for inviting me to join you all today at this important forum, but for your prioritization and elevation of this important topic. The United States remains deeply committed to working with you and other like-minded governments, civil society, academics, and the private sector to advance democratic values, peace, security, and the empowerment of women and girls in all their diversity. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Katrina. And I know she had to leave us, but we really appreciate her taking the time to join us virtually. Our next panelist that we'll hear from is the Regional Director for NDI, Robert Benjamin.
Thank you, Valerie, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm humbled to be here in the presence and along with such distinguished leaders in politics and government and diplomacy. I'm inspired by the example of leadership that Madeleine Albright extended to us all, both as Secretary of State of the United States and as chairman of my organization, the National Democratic Institute, NDI. And I have to say, I'm feeling empowered by the leadership and the perseverance that hundreds of women across this region have shown me across the depth and breadth of NDI support in politics, political parties, elections, civil society, government, parliament, and we draw great energy from their example. I think it's fair to say for NDI that we believe that democratic advancement irretrievably requires women's empowerment and gender equality. And we also believe that women's empowerment and gender equality go through the political process. And that's why NDI here in North Macedonia and across the region spends a lot of time and effort supporting many women in politics. And I'm very proud to say that some are with me here on stage, and there are many in this room. That's right, and with Secretary Albright very much present, both in person and in spirit. And we've learned, I think, a few lessons along the way, and I'd like to mention a few of them. One has to do with what is somewhat tritely called capacity development. People speak of the need to develop women's capacity in politics, and I don't tend to look at it in the sense of fostering capability or somehow developing talent. It's already there, of course. What we're really talking about is an enabling process. I've met a lot of women who have some interest in politics, and I ask them, would you consider running for office? No, they say, I'm not qualified to do so. And I say, well, what do you do? They say, I'm a school principal, I'm a small business owner, I handle the pension fund for my municipality, I started and run a non-governmental group on child welfare. And I say, you're not qualified to stand for political office, represent constituents, take a look at the budget, pass legislation. I think you are. And I don't think that women often, unlike men, have that perspective. And so we spend a lot of time, I think, encouraging and kind of converting women to stand up, to take space, and to, as President Osmani said, use their voices, and to do so in very constructive ways. In fact, today, my NDI colleagues here in North Macedonia are up the road in Mavrvo, supporting and implementing a women's leadership academy within a political party that we support, among others here in the country. And that has to do with individual training, yes, but also building collective strategy, which takes me to my second point, and that's lowering structural barriers. And by that I mean how political practice and actual structures impede women once involved in politics. And here again, we have to look at political parties. We have to look at candidate selection. We have to understand how candidate selection influences who's on the ballot, in what position on the ballot, and therein how women are recognized for their contributions, their attributes, their talents, and can run for office. We have to look at finance. We have to look at access to finance for women who often are on the short end of the stick in running campaigns. We also have to look at decision-making within political parties, both formal, structural, but also informal. Sometimes decisions are made outside of formal processes, as we know, and those informal processes can be gender biased, in which women, by design, maybe by intent, maybe not, are excluded from the process. All those barriers need to be reduced. We mentioned the election quota, and I think that's a fascinating topic because we supported the Women's Caucus in Parliament in North Macedonia to pass a gender election quota, same too in Kosovo with Secretary Albright's help. What we've seen over time is that women who were initially, yes, elected because of the quota, that has given way to women now being elected on merit. Not that they didn't have merit before, but now it's recognized by the electorate. More women are being elected on preferential votes than ever before. And I think that speaks directly to the recognition that people, citizens, men and women, see in the value not only of having women hold power, but see that the power is shared between men and women. The third thing we're learning in the political process is that social change matters. You can legislate, and we should, and you should enable, and we do, but at the end of the day, we are also talking about social processes of history, of culture, of economy, arts, and arts as well. And I think that we are coming to a point, maybe it's delayed, maybe it's not quite sufficiently defined, in this region where, to Slavica's point, Deputy Prime Minister, men have to and are, I think, coming to the realization, slowly, but ineffably, that they too are gender and that they need to be part, not only part of this discussion, they need to co-lead this discussion and take the responsibility, assume the obligations, because it is not only important for society, I think it will become increasingly important for their own political viability, their own political aspirations to do just that. And that's a very interesting space to be in, and it's something that we're paying a lot of attention to, and with the support of the Swedish government here in North Macedonia, are working in ways that I think can be conducive to that end. And in this space of social change, we do have to look, unfortunately, at gender-based political violence. 85% of women serving in parliament across the world, according to the IPU, have reportedly suffered, some form of gender-based psychological violence. That cannot be the price, that cannot be the cost for women to participate alongside men equally. There's no space for sexism, there's no space for misogyny. You can have political disagreements, but keep it as that, and not attack women on the basis of sex. And so we are supporting efforts through social media campaigns and otherwise. Here in North Macedonia, last fall, we supported the Vote No to Violence campaign in connection with local elections. I think we are raising awareness. Women are raising awareness. Some men are doing so as well. And that's important because you have to speak before you can act, and action, I think, will follow. The final area that we're paying a lot of attention to is governance. Putting more women into elected office, reducing structural barriers, and promoting social change all leads to, we hope, the ability for government to serve the interests, the needs, and the aspirations of girls and women in equal measure to that of men. Not more, but not less. So when we look at labor force participation, equal pay, childcare policies, single parent families, the very safety and security of an individual, reproductive rights, when we look at all of these issues, there has to be a dividend for women across society to take their place, to see their issues represented, their needs addressed, their aspirations seen and supported. And I think that leads us to some really interesting areas where we look at women or gender equality caucuses in Parliament and the effect that they have in setting the agenda. We look at municipal gender equality commissions, as here in North Macedonia, and see how local government is taking up this cause of serving the interests of women. In Kosovo, and with the support of President Osmani and others, we've had a tremendous effort. We call it the Week of Women. 100 women new to politics and public life gather in Pristina, and elected leaders come and they speak, and they actually serve to set the agenda, the policy agenda, much as President Osmani is talking about. And I think that's about, again, using voice, taking up space, and directing the resources and the power of government toward the betterment of women along equal lines. So I want to conclude my remarks by, again, thanking everyone for their support and allowing myself and NDI to participate today. I am reminded very much of Secretary Albright. I think I've had the chance to work with her in this region oftentimes. She was a leader and she was a woman, and there was no distinction between those two attributes. And I think of that and I admire it, and with my colleagues here, we will continue to support that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert, and I especially appreciate your calling out the importance of men in this conversation as well, so I appreciate that. Our final remarks will be from Secretary General Albert Hani, and then we'll move into a time of question and answer. So you have all of these amazing panelists. I hope you'll be thinking of great questions to ask. Secretary General?
Ovrajko. Thank you very much, Valerie. Please let me start just by thanking first to the host or the organizers for conveying this really important, prestigious group talking about extremely important topic of Mother Earth, I would say, even from now. I wanted to start the speech with remarks that I noticed immediately when I entered into the stage. When I saw the room almost empty, it suddenly started to be filled in. And I thought, okay, that's, I mean, before it started to be filled in, I thought that's a great point for me. I could directly point on what we are actually and how we are actually treating women and the topic of women in general. And where are those men champions that should enable environment by hearing those concerns that are coming exactly from this stage. I mean, yeah, even if you look at the moment, you would realize, just see the picture, you would realize that more are women. I don't want to be critical. I want to be critical mostly to the men champions that I think are really in need to open their mind and their soul to simply enable the environment for women to take more positions, decision-making position. And that can be done only by hearing it. And by the way, my presence here, it's not just something that I consider it as a courage. I really consider it as a duty, as something that I owe to my mother, to my sister, to my wife, to all people that shaped my being here. So I am here literally because of them. Let me just continue. In my speech, I have written some of other points that I really want to address here. I will start with saying that the principles of equal participation of women and men in decision-making is important for ensuring that the decisions are relevant to women and men, and the access to resources are equally distributed to the entire population. We in RICO, I come from RICO, I'm the Secretary General of RICO, we care a lot about the gender. 60% of managing positions are held by women. We are mainstreaming gender in all layers of our work, including the obligation to partner and support institutions that share the same values when it comes to gender. Now, gender equality and good governance go hand in hand, so we cannot see them separately. And it can be achieved it cannot be achieved actually without women's participation in public life and full participation in decision-making processes. This is clearly reflected in the UN conventions and instruments, such as the Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and the Beijing Platform for Actions, to which countries of the region are actually fully committed. The Biden-Harris initiative or administration has issued the first ever national gender strategy to advance the full participation of all people, including women and girls, in the United States and around the world, setting the base for making sure that everybody reaches its own full potentials, regardless of gender, is both moral and strategic imperative. Yet, no country has achieved full gender equality, which puts us in position to act tirelessly and advocate for this issue. This is why one of the reasons I'm also here. Freestanding mechanisms such as this of the Biden and many others that were mentioned here, I see as the backbone of equality and equity. They should give life actually to all the nice words that we are used to put in important documents and important events such as this one. In addition, the principle of equality ensures equity in provision of services and planning, where funds are not only spent effectively and efficiently, but are also inclusive for the most vulnerable groups. This principle cannot be achieved without engaging women leaders who, through their own example, such as you here, showcase how female leadership can be productive and support all women and men in society. True female leadership is characterized by a mentality of allowing others to full-heartedly become part of idea, project, or mission or task. Women lead differently, it was said here, and should be encouraged to manifest leadership styles that differ from male-dominated norms. RICO, in fact, has and will continue to support the engagement of youth, young women especially, and girls with youth cooperation activities and reconciliation processes in the region of Western Balkans 6, we call it. We should trust women more than we do right now. Based on the Shared Future study, this is the study that we do in RICO, women show a great potential to contribute to peace-building processes. Again, this was mentioned by many of you. In this study, the findings show that, firstly, more young people are optimistic about peace and improved relations in the region. There is relatively little variation between societies, while young women tend to be more optimistic. This approach is what we need more. Women can play an important role in these processes. And secondly, the analysis showed that there is a wide range of views among the youth and youth on gender and patriarchal values that were many times mentioned again in this fora here. Although some egalitarian trends can be perceived. Support to gender equality can be seen also in the above average support of more women in leadership positions through the Western Balkans. We have good examples that are around the region of Western Balkans. Young women agreed with this more often than young men. Today in this panel, we had the opportunity to speak, to also learn from the women who have walked the path towards the successes and break barriers for the next generations. And this is important, for the girls and boys to become inclusive leaders who will confront the patriarchal norms. Moreover, due to those women, the leaders of tomorrow, we will have the opportunity to apply human-centered leadership, which we definitely need, which will create a necessary condition for every person to grow in its highest potential. After all, gender equality is about rights, equal opportunities, equal responsibilities for both men and women, boys and girls. All of us should put more efforts into creating and promoting an enabling environment for girls and women to assume and succeed in leadership roles. Thank you once again to the audience that also really had, I won't call it courage, but showed really interest and passion to hear and take actions for positioning better women in the society and girls.
Thank you, Albert, and I appreciate your emphasis on the importance of bringing young women and young girls and boys into this conversation so that hopefully we're shifting as we train up the next generation of leaders. Well, it's very exciting, I think, this afternoon to have the time to hear from some of these amazing women leaders that are on the front lines of thinking about women and governance and leading. So I would love to open it up to any audience questions as we get started. I want to go ahead and kick off our conversation, though, with Ambassador Burns. We've heard a lot about Ambassador, the Summit for Democracy, and the fact that the commitments towards gender equality are really the heart of the summit framework. So I'd like to ask you if you could share a little more about what that looks like under the Summit for Democracy framework.
Well, thank you, Valerie, first for coming from the United States to be part of this discussion, and especially to our host for pulling together such an amazing panel of women leaders from throughout the region. Yes, we've heard a lot of references to Summit for Democracies, and not just from Kat. I was delighted to hear all of these women leaders talk about Summit for Democracies as well. I think most of you know the background, but President Biden launched the Summit for Democracy last year as a way of bringing together all of the stakeholders and partners from across government, civil society, media, and the private sector to address some of the most challenging democratic challenges that we all face as a community. And it was heartening, though not at all a surprise, that North Macedonia and other countries from this particular region were invited to be part of that first summit and to play a leading role because of their country's commitments to not only the values and ideals behind democracy, but the incredible experiences that have taken place in this region and what they can contribute. There are three basic pillars of the Summit for Democracy. They are fighting corruption, countering authoritarianism, and defending human rights. But most broadly, the Summit for Democracies is about protecting and advancing the core values of democracy, of which gender equality and women's political involvement are very much a part of that. President Biden pointed out that democracies don't happen by accident. We have to defend them, we have to fight for it, we have to strengthen, and we have to renew democracy. And I think that goes also to the issues that we're talking about here today. You know, many of us just sat through a panel right before this talking about the challenging, turbulent times that we live in and the breadth of challenges that we all face. And if we're going to come together to face those, then we need our best political leaders, not just at the table, but at the head of the table, based on their tenacity and expertise. And if you look at this panel, And if you look at many of the women that I see in the audience here today, and those all of us are working with throughout this region, you recognize that women are a huge part of that. So the Summit for Democracies has been a framework for addressing all of these issues about democratic process, about moving forward representation for all who need to be a part of that democratic framework. We're very hopeful that the next summit will be held in person, but we have no doubt that there are going to be some incredible examples and showcases from the Western Balkans regions themselves as part of this discussion about how we move democracies forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Burns. I'd love to, we've talked a little bit about some of the challenges in advancing women's representation and participation, but I'd like to flip that a little bit and hear from some of our guests on some of the opportunities, particularly to increase participation and representation in the Balkan region. So President Osmani, would you like to share a little bit about, kind of from your viewpoint, what are some of the opportunities, and then we'd love to hear from our colleagues from North Macedonia as well.
Well, thank you. I'm very optimistic that our societies are emancipating and advancing towards the realization of the full potential of all our people, women and men alike. And it is a transformation that has happened quite quickly, I'd have to say. I mean, just a few years ago, we were struggling to just recognize our right to run for office, and we've managed, for example, in Kosovo as a country, to make sure that it is the people of Kosovo, that elect women and make them the most voted people in the history of the country, in the history of parliamentary elections. And that shows that sometimes the society is getting emancipated and advanced even quicker than some political parties. And I think that is an opportunity, but at the same time is an opportunity because the society is telling political parties, if you want to win elections, you need to put women at the front. You need to make sure that women are not just at any table, but at the decision-making table, because there have been plenty of cases when political parties try to include women in a way where they are at the table, but then decisions are made somewhere else behind closed doors between three men, and they are only announced at the big table. So women don't really participate. So there is a lot that is going on in the Western Balkans that I think provides an opportunity for women to engage more, to have a stronger voice, but not just in politics. I would say it is extremely important for all women, especially young women and girls, to understand that they can make their voice heard and leave their print in the society and make a change in the society in any area of life, whether it's in entrepreneurship or in the ICT sector or in STEM, whether it's in science or other areas. It doesn't really matter. Wherever you are, you don't need to be a politician necessarily to make the change in the society that is needed. So the more we have women in politics, the more the societies will understand and will advance into including more women and giving a stronger role to women in other areas as well. And finally, let me point out that despite of the successes in politics, which are really encouraging, we should feel fulfilled as women in politics the moment when we make sure that our role and the positions that we have, we are using them to make the life of all women better. Whether we're talking about a housewife, whether we're talking about someone that made the decision to not go to work, whether we're talking about someone that made the decision not to marry, whether we're talking about women in agriculture or women astronauts. It doesn't matter. We need to make sure that the positions that we have in politics are used to push forward the positions of women in all walks of life. So the opportunities are out there, to conclude, because the society is transforming in a positive way. So we should use these opportunities, always understanding, as I say, and it's never enough to say it, I believe, because it's never an easy way. It's a very bumpy road. I don't want to paint a rosy picture, because it's extremely difficult, especially when we're talking about politics or the army, the security area. It's extremely difficult. And there are so many times when too many people try to convince you to give up. But whenever you feel like giving up, think of all those little girls who are watching and who hope that you don't.
Thank you. I want to open it up to the audience for questions. If you have a question, there are staff with microphones around. And if you would raise your hand so we can see where you are. I think we have our first question. And if you just make sure to introduce yourself and if you're directing it to any one of our panelists.
Hello, everyone. My name is Azra Berbic. I'm coming from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Yeah, again, I'm Azra Berbic, coming from Bosnia and Herzegovina. I am a human rights, environment, and peace-building activist. I, as a young woman, feel extremely frustrated, to be honest, because I've been following very much Prespa forum, and I didn't see myself represented. This is the first panel that I see myself truly represented, but not to the fullest, because I also, again, don't see young people. Like, according to law, you are free to feel as ever you want, but in a sense, I see extremely frustrated that this is second to last panel, and the next panel is youth panel, and also that's the last. Also, seeing the audience here, a lot of men and women, unfortunately, leaving to, as you've just mentioned, have deals maybe, have some meetings, or even I saw some groups of men here, like being here, not listening to you, but actually having some sort of meetings and giggling and having their own discussions. So as a female, I feel that we are not respected enough. And it really does frustrate me, like that there are all of these agendas and programs and all of these deals and decisions made without us, without women and without young people. So I feel like, okay, it's just to fill out, you know, the mark that we gave you at the end, this place to talk about it. I admire every single of you, and all of you, especially the president of Kosovo, you inspire me deeply. And thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing all of the inspiring stories. But I know, I can only imagine how much struggle there is. But this is a question to female members of the panel. Do you actually, looking at this today, feel respected enough? I know you are now in a position that your voice must be heard, luckily. But as a female, I don't see that in general we as a females in Western Balkans are respected enough. Just like taking into consideration this fact that so many people left. And where are all of these political leaders who came here with so much security measures and everything? Where are they? Where are they to listen to these messages? Because some of these messages are extremely important to all of us, and as you mentioned, it's extremely important to men to hear it. Because still, even we had this much of progress, they are the ones who are making decisions mostly. So thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for your perspective. I know President Osmani has to leave, so if you wanted to say anything in response, and then would love to open it up to our other panelists.
Was it Azra? Azra. I make sure that I'm respected. There's nothing less than that I accept. But I want to reassure you of one thing. The fight that we are fighting, which is for all the people that we represent, no matter their gender, we don't only fight it in panels like this. We fight the fight every day, every single day of our work. And I'll be fighting that fight in my next meeting now. You can rest assured that no matter how many panels there are, we will continue for it, because as it was said over and over again, it is the right thing to do. It is the smartest thing to do also for our economies. But I would add, it is just because our societies have suffered so much from discrimination. Our countries have suffered so much discrimination. And who understands better than us what it is to be discriminated? Who understands better than the people of Kosovo, the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and other countries in the region? And precisely because of that, we should fight more to not allow discrimination on any ground in our societies, especially not the gender-based discrimination, the gender-based violence, and the other kind of negative phenomena that have held our societies back in the past. So let's join forces and make sure, whether in panels, the last or the first, it doesn't matter. I think, even though I was also in the first panel, unfortunately the only woman president in that panel, but I think it is important that in those panels as well, we fight the fight, because it's the right fight, it's the right thing to do. And it doesn't matter if you're in politics, if you're in civil society, if we're sitting here or there, and whether we're in this room or after we continue in other meetings, we need to continue knowing that collectively we will be successful only when we are collectively feeling that we are respected enough, as you said at the beginning. Thank you, and I really apologize, but we had informed the host quite some time ago that my bilateral meeting will start in perhaps 3 minutes or so, so I hope for the understanding of everyone. And also to reassure you once again that in my next meeting as well, I'll continue what we started here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, President Osmani, for your time. You're definitely an inspiration to all of us, and we appreciate your comments and sharing your vision. Thank you. I'd love to open it up to any more audience questions. We have time for about one more before we wind down our conversation. So again, would love to ask if you would just raise your hand. We have mics in the audience. I see a question in the very back.
Thank you. Hello, hi. I'm Bisera Gurovska. I'm one of the guests from UNICEF, one of the young activists. And I wanted to first note that this is a very important a very important discussion. And I wanted to ask a little bit more about the economic aspect, because when it comes to the wage gap and other issues that women have when it comes to their economic freedom, those are important in the sense that women can't be in governance if they first don't feel economically confident and if they first aren't financially stable enough. And studies have shown that more men are financially stable than women, that women's careers, or what we stereotypically think of as women's careers, are paid less. And a lot of studies showcase that it's because the virtues that we think of as male virtues like leadership and so on and so forth, and logical kind of capabilities, are much more valued in society than the virtues that we stereotypically think of as female virtues, right? Like empathy, like compassion and caring for other people's feelings and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to ask the panelists how they interpret that and what kind of conversations they might have had in their specific countries, especially about the gender wage gap, both the controlled one and the uncontrolled one, and more specifically about the difference between, again, stereotypically female careers, like, for example, being a preschool or a high school teacher, and stereotypically male careers, like something related to the STEM fields and so on and so forth. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your question. I'd love to turn that over to one of our colleagues, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Deputy Foreign Minister, who both touched on that in your remarks. So if you want to respond before we close out our panel with Ambassador Burns.
Thank you for the question. First of all, I strongly believe that you don't have to wait to fulfill some preconditions regarding economic situation, personal situation to involve in politics. It is very important to believe, and to believe that you're fighting for the right thing. I mean, I was a student when we got involved in politics. We were not rich. We were just trying to find out with a scholarship or something to increase our income without help of our parents. But most important thing is to have an idea that will lead you to fight for the right thing and to make contribution and changes in society. Otherwise, if you wait other conditions to be fulfilled, you will never do that. So my strong message is for everybody, just to follow the beliefs and the ideologies that you have that are right for the society, that can make major positive changes in the society, and to be proud to be part of it, because it is not about one person, it is not about one political party, it's not about one government, it's about the whole society engagement to achieve such goals.
Thank you. Under Secretary General or Deputy Foreign Minister, if you'd like to weigh in, I'd love to.
So what I want to say is that what happens if you are quite intelligent, a hardworking woman, and you are not financially very strong? It does not mean that you don't have a chance to achieve something. With hard work, everything is achieved. So we have to work hard and to find the point to show ourselves that we are ready to achieve something. So as politicians now, I can say, we have worked hard, we have prepared, we finished studies, and we started from the beginning, step by step, in political parties. We learned a lot from there, and now I'm deputy minister, and other women in the panel have different positions. I think that with hard work everything is achievable, but we need support from men, not to support us financially, but to support us in achieving our dreams. And when I see here men, I'm happy, but as Albert said, when you see at the audience, when you have full audience, it is different, and when you have few people who are here just accidentally because they have to be here, it is not good. It is not good. And I said to Albert, if we are going to have good audience, that means that we have made steps forward. And now I see that we have made steps forward, but it is not enough. We have to work all together, the youth, women from different, let's say, political parties, religions, ethnic groups, to achieve the best for all women in North Macedonia, in the region, and the whole world. And I want to mention that we have another conference organized by Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is titled Women in Foreign Policy, but it does not discuss just gender issues in foreign policy, but it touches other spheres of life. also economy. We created a network of women diplomats from Western Balkans, 6 countries, with the aim to strengthen our cooperation together and to work together, but we don't want to be just a regional network of female diplomats, but also we want to open to the world and make connections with other female networks as well.
Thank you so much, Deputy Foreign Minister. And thank you so much to you and your team for putting together this panel and creating the space for this conversation. And thank you to all of our distinguished panelists for the work that you're doing and also your perspective as we talk about the importance of women in governance. With that, it's my pleasure to turn the mic over to Ambassador Burns for concluding remarks.
Thank you for that. It's really hard to conclude a panel that has covered such depth and such expertise, but maybe let me make 3 points. And that is that obviously we're still at the beginning of a conversation. There were some mentions about women, peace, and security, and that is an ongoing conversation. But there is documented evidence that when women are involved in security, decision-making, security operations, peace and conflict issues, you have longer, better, and more sustainable solutions. There's also a vibrant conversation about the economic participation of women, and real data about how when women are not only on boards but leading boards, corporations improve their profit levels, and organizations having women at various levels of management help revitalize the organization. That conversation is ongoing. There's also been a very big conversation about women in politics, and much of it has been quota-focused and capacity-building focused as a way of looking specifically at equal representation. And I've always preferred the word involvement over representation, because it's not just enough to have women at those or in those positions, but women who are actually leading from within those positions. But I think what we're hoping for is, with the Summit of Democracy framework, is that we're really going to take this conversation now to a much broader level and say, okay, let's look at all of the challenges that we face there, shaping the future of the Western Balkans and the contemporary European security architecture. How can women be part of that equation? And the second point I want to come back to is a point that was raised here several times, which is that for this region, democracy is still a relatively new experience. When you're talking about governance and equality and representation, 30 years is not a long time. So when you look at this region, there is a success story. And I hear Azra's frustration, and I hear the frustration of others that we want more faster, and indeed we need more faster. But there are a lot of best practices that are coming out of this region that can help lead the way. And that brings me sort of to a third and final point, because women are a minority in corporations, in business, in many leadership positions, but we're not actually a minority in the population. We have numbers and we have experience, and if we can galvanize these efforts and be successful in this sphere, think about the message that that sends to other parts of our democracies, other members of our society. President Osmani talked about the fact that we must use our positions to make the life of all women better. Well, actually, we must use our positions to make the life of all people better and send the message out to other communities that a vibrant democracy, a democracy that's able to capture the challenges of this time, needs to enable and empower all of its citizens, whether that be citizens of different abilities. Important to reach out to other underrepresented groups. This is the month of global pride, making sure that our LGBTQI+ members of society are also included in this conversation. But we can lead the way. And I am sure that as we go through future iterations of this, we will see more and more people in the room. And I hope that's the same for the youth panel that comes to follow. Thank you again for pulling us all together for this great experience. And once again, thank you to the host.
I hope you'll join me in thanking our panelists. And thank you to all of you for taking the time to be part of the audience and engaging with us. We're going to conclude our panel now, and I'll invite all of our panelists up to the front of the stage for a photo. Thank you.